Hello, my friends of the internet. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Sort of like the last time, this episode will be a little bit different, but for a different reason than the reason it was different last time. I guess it's kind of the nature of just having a new channel. We do some new stuff. And this one, I guess you could think of as kind of a debrief presentation of a topic. In that topic, this time is going to be oil, nuclear, uranium, and critical infrastructure. So, kind of a little bit of everything. It was inspired by what I've been reading today, some recent events, world events that we will be looking at, and considering from an emergency preparedness and emergency management perspective. So, what I want to do to start this off is I want to get into an article from Reuters. Mainstream news, not exactly, you can't really say that's conspiracy theory stuff. It is public information pretty much at this point. But let's jump right into that. So, as you can see here, we have an article, and this man right here, this is Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. And he said Monday oil prices could reach $300 a barrel if Russian crude was shunned by the West. But he said such a scenario was unlikely. Now, oil right now at the making of this video is about $315, $316. Past 2 days it's been about 100. Briefly over the past couple of weeks it spiked up to 130, but then it came back down to that 100. That would be about a threefold increase from where we are now if it goes to 300. So that is a significant amount of money. Moving on, trading sources have said some buyers have been wary of taking Russian oil barrels to avoid becoming entangled in Western sanctions imposed because of the Ukraine crisis. Novak said it was impossible for Europe to avoid buying Russian oil and gas for now, saying European calls to halt purchases were political gestures to attract attention. For now, it's impossible for Europe to reject Russian hydrocarbons, he said. We will see how it goes in the future. So, what Mr. Novak here is saying is that while he doesn't think that Europe is actually going to follow the US and ban the import of Russian oil, and he thinks that they can't do that. He thinks that they actually can't do that because they don't have enough energy independence to be able to do that themselves. But if they do, that would drive the price of oil to about $300 a barrel. That is immense. So, is it likely? No, but it is more likely now than it really ever has been before. And it's likely enough that it is something to consider, and it is something that people are considering up in high levels of government. Russia was working to maintain oil export volumes by addressing logistical issues and will continue its oil and gas production as it was before sanctions, he said, he being Mr. Novak. Two sources told Reuters that Russia had increased its oil gas condensate output to 11.11 million barrels per day between March 1st and March 20th, from an average output of 11.06 million barrels per day recorded in February. That means since February, they've actually been producing more oil. So since these sanctions, they're actually producing more than they were before. Now, these last two paragraphs, I think, are two of maybe the most interesting in this, even though they're given such little attention. Novak said Moscow was considering banning uranium exports of Russian uranium to the United States to retaliate for sanctions. The United States relies on Russia and its allies Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan for about half its uranium imports, which are used to power U.S. nuclear plants. So, why is uranium important? Because it is used to power U.S. nuclear plants. To what extent, might you ask? Well, let's go over to this other article. This is from oilprice.com. Russia is reportedly considering a ban on enriched uranium exports. Russia is the third largest source of uranium in the U.S., accounting for about 16% of U.S. total imports. several weeks ago when Biden instituted a wholesale ban on Russian energy exports. So when he banned the importing of the oil from Russia, he explicitly carved out Russian uranium suppliers for the simple reason that the US is very much reliant on Russia for its nuclear power plant needs. After all, Russia is the third largest source of US uranium, accounting for 16% of US imports. This prompted us, oilprices.com, still writing, on March 9th, whether Putin would place enriched uranium on the list of banned Russian exports. So whether Putin would prevent uranium from being exported. And why uranium stocks soared late last week after U.S. Energy Department signaled more aid for current and future nuclear reactors. Moments ago, the very thorny issue of Russian uranium came to a head when Russian news agency TASS cited Deputy Prime Minister Novak, who said that Russia is considering a ban on uranium exports. Now, why is uranium exports or imports, in the case of from the Americans' perspective, why does that matter? Well, they power our nuclear power plants and far, far more than that even. So, in emergency management, there's these things called critical infrastructure, and there are 16 that are identified right here on the screen. And we can go through just see the chemical sector, communications, dams, defense, energy, financial. And then right here, we have nuclear reactors, materials, and waste sector. So if we do not have the uranium for our nuclear facilities, then our nuclear reactor sector is very vulnerable. It's very at risk right now. But it's not just that. It's not just our nuclear reactors. We open up this page right here. They are so nice to give us a little overview and just go through some of the nuclear facilities in the US. But if we just scroll right down here, this sector is interdependent with other critical infrastructure sectors. And arguably, it's actually way more than just these sectors they list here, but this is a good idea to sort of get the gears turning. And I mean, the chemical sector, the emergency services sector, healthcare. North America performs about 20 million medical procedures each year using radioactive materials. So we can't get the uranium for our nuclear facilities, and we can't get the nuclear materials, radioactive materials for medical procedures, then this is not even just about power plants. This extends far beyond that. And to get a better idea of this interconnectivity, there's a chart that I think helps us out. Now, this chart I think is really good at visually representing the interconnectivity, how everything plays on each other. There are two additional sectors they have here that shouldn't really be here, in my opinion. So they have 18, there are really 16. They include national monuments and icons, as well as postal and shipping. Postal and shipping probably should be in transportation. National monuments and icons, those are important, especially from a disaster recovery perspective and preservation. But I would not consider them critical because they do not, our logistical systems do not depend on them. But anyway, on the bottom row, third from the right, we see the nuclear reactors. And we can see that they are connected for the wastewater, the drinking water and wastewater on the right, to energy, to chemical. They're completely connected. And to the ones that they're not directly connected to, they are secondarily connected. For example, if the nuclear sector went down, it would impact energy. And energy, chemical. Chemical sector, that would include petrochemical facilities. And petrochemical facilities are where they refine oil into gasoline for our cars. Now, let's say the nuclear facilities, the power plants, they couldn't get their uranium. Let's say something bad happens and we lose access to a nuclear power plant. And we need energy from somewhere else. So nuclear's down, it's depending on energy. Energy, in order to have the gasoline to produce the energy, we need the chemical sector to produce the gasoline, to refine it from the crude oil. Well, if we don't have the energy, if the chemical sector can't keep up with that, then that plays on the transportation sector. Because if the transportation sector doesn't have the oil, doesn't have the gasoline, then they can't transport the crude oil to the chemical sector. And what about the critical manufacturing, like car manufacturing? What if they don't have the energy they need or the chips they need to make vehicles? Well, then there's not the same number of vehicles to transport the goods. As you can see, everything depends on these other sectors, depend on the other sectors. One cannot go down without every one of these being dramatically impacted or even failing. And that's really one of the reasons why it is critical. It is critical infrastructure because we cannot afford to lose one. If something happens to one sector, downstream, things will be secondarily impacted on all sectors. But right now, it's even worse than that because as these articles we looked at before showed, oil could go up to $300 a barrel. That will drastically affect energy costs, which will dramatically impact travel, transportation. But it's even worse than that because also we have the issue with the nuclear facilities, the uranium issue. We're having issues getting the uranium that we need for our nuclear facilities. So now we have two sectors that are under direct threat. One is bad, two is critically bad. You know, now is a really good time to increase one's preparedness. Things have gotten more expensive in the past year. Year over year inflation officially is 8%, probably more than that if we're looking at broader statistics. But things are still relatively affordable. You can still overnight something on Amazon. You can still get free shipping if you pay $25 or have Prime, whatever it is. You still go to the grocery store and get canned food, get a bag of black beans, bag of rice, 20-pound bag. Well, what if that changes? Right now, let's say it costs $1,000 for the truck to bring your produce from the farm to the store. What if that costs $3,000? What about $5,000? How high can that go while you can still afford it? You know, this is not any financial advice or anything like that. I don't get into that, at least not right now. But if there's important things you need in order to be prepared that you've been holding off on, it might be worth considering right now, getting them, because we still can. I'm not sure in 6 months, 9 months, a year. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get them. And if you can, how much you'll have to bleed for them, how much more they'll cost you. The dollar's losing value. Things are getting more expensive, even proportionate to that. So while you're getting poorer, the world is getting more expensive. Preparedness shouldn't make anybody scared. As a matter of fact, it is the entire purpose of preparedness, or one of them, one of the side effects maybe, is to make you less scared because you know you have what you need to make it through. So this is not the time to panic, to make emotional decisions, but it is time to evaluate, to assess these hazards, these risks, and make balanced decisions based on them. Right now, there is a very high hazard and risk to everything that is going on. It is very unstable, it is very uncertain, and at least in most of our lifetimes, this is probably the worst it's ever been, the most threat indicators we've ever seen. While we still have time, we should take preparedness seriously. If you have land that you're not using, plant some crops. Nothing crazy. Just maybe a few tomato plants, some green beans, some potatoes, whatever you can. Doesn't take very much energy. It's good for you, good for your mental health, and it could pay off if things get as bad as they absolutely could, and as people are acknowledging that they very well could. You know, a lot of times preppers, so called, are historically seen as kind of crazy and preparing for things that are never going to happen. If a prepper had prepared for this 4 years ago, people would have said you're crazy. You're just paranoid. People aren't really saying that anymore. And better to be the kind of crazy guy when things fall apart, if they do, and to have what you need, and to have what you need for the people you want to have it for, than to walk around not doing what you know you want to do and need to do because you're afraid of being a little weird. And I know this has been another really upbeat video, and you're welcome for that. If you took anything away from it, if you think I did a good job, if you think I'm terrible, if you hate my guts, like it. And if you don't like it, leave me a comment. And if you want to be mean, tell me how bad I am in the comment. But you're still doing me a favor because comments are good comments and they help the channel. But whatever you do, just do something, interact with the channel, and I would appreciate it. But that is about it, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good evening or afternoon or whatever time it is in your part of the world. Have a good one.